All right, as usual here, I got an orange one here. I looked for white, but I couldn't find it, so you'll have to deal with my fluorescence. All right, let's begin as usual. Let's say our 39 books of the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentation, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. I always get to there around Jonah, and I can't remember if I said Joel or Jonah, so I always have a little hiccup there. So if I fall out, that's usually what I'm trying to do, is remember where I am. I don't think about it when I say them real fast. Dad in his prayers mentions often the idea of us being conscious, before the Lord, and help us to be conscious, help us to be aware in the present moment of what's taking place. And they say that about 95% of the things that we do and the things that we think in a day, we thought them the day before, and that they just kind of run automatically. It's kind of like tying your shoes. When's the last time you sat and really thought about, doing your little bunny ear and going around and pulling it through? We just do it. Because we did it so many times, we don't think about it. And I do that with the Old Testament books, and oftentimes with my memory verses. And it's surprising to me how many times, continually, currently, where I'm doing a study and I see a verse that I memorized as a youth, that it's like I've been saying it all my whole life, but just saying it. Just hit and play. And we want to be able to memorize them. That's great. It's good that we can just put them back. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. Whatever you have to do to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, sing the song. Jesus called them one by one, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Whatever you have to do to remember it, you do it. If you have to have your list, if you have to get it out and look at it, that's okay too. Just do what you can to learn it. But I said all that to say, as we learn these things, let's make sure that even the facts that we already know. Again, I'm going back at memory lane on different sermons and different lessons that Dad taught, but I remember as a teenager he taught a sermon on Try It Again for the First Time. It was off a Kellogg's Cornflakes commercial. They said, try it again for the first time. He ate cornflakes almost every morning. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of bland, but he'd try them again for the first time. And it's that idea, when we learn these things, if it's elementary, if we're going over something and it's just a review to you, keep in mind that other people might be learning it for the first time. Other people might be making connections that they haven't made before. And let's stir ourselves to remembrance and try it again, learn it again, memorize it again, go over it again for the first time. And when we do that consciously, it really does help us put it in the framework where it goes in the context, and helps us tie the things together so that we can really see those big overshadowing ideas and themes in the scriptures. Now that we've said our books of the Old Testament, let's say our 17 major divisions of the Bible. How are y'all coming on that? Are y'all starting to memorize it? If you raise your hand, if you kind of starting to get them down a little bit. Before the flood, the scattering of the people, the patriarchs, the Exodus, the wandering in the wilderness, the invasion and conquering of Canaan, the judges, the united kingdom, the divided kingdom, Judah alone, the captivity, the return from captivity, the 400 years of silence, the life of Christ, the early church, and the letters to the Christians. I'll give you fair warning, and I'm gonna start. We're gonna ease off of doing it as a group, and we're gonna start seeing who knows it. So, get ready. I'm gonna start testing you. So, and again, there should be no shame for us to try it here in front of each other. If we can't try to say the books of the Bible or come up with basic facts and memorize some things so that we can have conversations with Hayden and Elena and Austin and Thomas, and ask them what they learned from class and tell them what we learned. If we're embarrassed to do that here, we're going to be embarrassed to share those things with people that we know in our everyday lives. So don't be bashful. And learn them. They're not going to go away. Before the flood. Tell me one thing, Joey, that's in before the flood. Garden of Eden. So there you had creation, Adam and Eve in the garden, first sin and its punishment. They're in the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel, genealogies of Cain, genealogies of Adam. Our next section, the flood. Tell me one thing from the flood. Brother Walton, tell me something from the flood. You remember one thing that stands out from that story to you? All right, Donna, is that you talking? The rainbow. Okay, I think the King James just calls it a bow, but we know, we talked about that water above the firmament from the water below the firmament. After the flood, the water, the light didn't get dispersed in that water. So it started refracting when the water droplets collect up in the atmosphere, in the clouds after a rain. Then it refracts that plain white light into the different spectrums of the light that we can see, the rainbow. How beautiful is that? And it's a reminder that God's going to keep his promises of not destroying the earth again with a flood. And as with many things, the devil tries to make evil good and good evil, and many have tried to manipulate our flag and make it something that it's, I say our flag, the rainbow, and make it something that it's not. But I refuse to let people take it away from me. And so, glad you remember that. What's after that? Before the flood, scattering of the people. What's something in there, Dad? Scattering the people.
Languages because of power.
Okay, languages. And there's a Bible software program called Babel. And it's a place to learn different languages. And so God confounded their languages, and I did some study this week on different languages, looking at some of the cuneiform and some of the old archaeological finds that are more recent, and some of the older ones, and how until just recently, for 100 years or more, they had those old cuneiform tablets, and it took them a while to decipher that. Some of the earliest languages around Sumer, before the Hittites and even the Elamites, those that were going to eventually inhabit the land of Canaan, those Semitic languages came. They can trace it back. And to me, it's so clear. When I take general science and classes and sociology classes through the years, to me it's just so plain when you put the Bible up to the world and the things that are there. I mean, it answers almost every question that goes unanswered in most of our science classes. And so God reminded us, and he didn't have to tell us everything, but he gave us enough to see where the different races came from, the different languages. Before the flood, the scattering of the people. What's next? Patriarchs. What's something from that, Billy? Okay. All right.
Instructions as to how they're to live godly lives and what they're to do.
All right. Can you name some of those patriarchs? Abraham. All right. Good. So since man rejected God in the garden, since man rejected God before the flood, Since man rejected God at the Tower of Babel, God says, okay, I'm done with you. So go, I'm going to disperse you, and you're not going to understand each other. Obviously, you don't understand me. And so he was kind of done with them there for a while. But God wants all men everywhere to repent. He wants to have a relationship with his offspring. And so, since man didn't really want a piece of God and ended up following other gods and going down different paths of different knowledge, he said, I still want to have this relationship. Oh, and I also made another promise before I made the one about the rainbow. I made one to the serpent before I made the promise to Eve and Adam, what their consequences would be. I said something about one would come through her seed that would bruise the head of that serpent. I mean, I need to keep that promise. And so, to prove that he was the God of all gods, not these gods that would become over the different pagan groups, he was going to be the God of all gods. And to prove that, he was going to have a relationship with a old guy that was down there in idolatry with his family, who was too old, and him and Sarah couldn't even have kids. So God's going to take a man that's really nobody in the middle of no, he was somewhere, but he's going to call him out and send him to nowhere. And he's going to make of this old man and old woman who she's bearing, he's going to make a mighty nation. So he's going to prove who he is. And that's what God really does. And that's what gives me hope a lot of times. When I'm about to give up on myself or I get frustrated with things, I think, well, I guess he could love me too, and I'm thankful for the love that he has towards all of us. And the love that he showed to Adam and Eve, the love that he showed even to Cain, even to put a mark on him to keep other people from plaguing him. I mean, even in the consequences of him murdering his brother, God has these compassionate, merciful, outstretched arms to us. And he's going to do that primarily through the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's going to be a segue from the book of Genesis to the book of Exodus. Because when the book of Exodus begins, the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, so it's going to become the 12 tribes of Israel. Those 12 sons are in Egypt because Joseph, who had been sold, is now over Egypt. And so they're there to get food during the famine. There was 7 years of famine, and they moved down there. And then you pick up the book of Exodus, and you open it, and it says, what? A Pharaoh arose that knew not Joseph. And you remember Genesis ends with Joseph on his deathbed giving the blessing down to the inheritance to his sons, just like Jacob had done with his sons to pass on. And don't forget in Genesis, it's 49, 48, Judah, that lineage is going to go through the seed of woman, through Abraham, Isaac, to Jacob, not Esau, remember that tricking, and then through Judah. Keep that lineage in mind. Keep that line, the line of Christ, because that's going to be the whole theme of this book. So they are in Egypt. They have grown into a great mighty nation from 75 of them to a few million, and the Egyptians get worried, so they oppress them. God hears their cries, and he sends to them a deliverer. Starts out with a little baby in a basket. Amram and Jochebed spare him. And so we know that story where Moses, at the age of 40, seems like he's going to take a lead, but ends up killing a man and having to go on the run. He's in hiding for basically 40 years in the land of Midian, and meets a man named Jethro and his daughters, and ends up marrying one of the daughters. And 40 years later, at the age of 80, watching the sheep, he sees a burning bush. So he gets called to go to Pharaoh to let the people go. The 10 plagues, water to blood, frogs, lice, flies, rain of cattle, hail, darkness, death of the firstborn. I think I said all of them. And so then they leave Egypt. God gives them a new calendar. They begin following the monthly lunar cycle, and they observe the Passover. He institutes the Passover, that last plague. They leave Egypt, spoiling Egypt. Remember, they asked their Egyptian neighbors if they could borrow their gold and their fancy stuff. You know, I can just see them. Oh, I'm having a dinner party. Can I borrow your goldware? And, you know, they get all their nice stuff, and then they leave with it. And so then they get to the Red Sea. They're surrounded by the mountains on one side, the Red Sea on the other, the Egyptian armies coming behind them, and God told them to fear not, stand still, see his salvation. And we remember Moses held up his rod, and the waters parted, and they went by on dry land. Again, these themes, the Passover being instituted, again, repeating that idea of blood that went back through the sacrifices that's really going to be instituted in the law of Moses, but goes all the way back to God covering their nakedness with animal hides and the shedding of blood then, and foretelling of the shedding of blood of Christ, which we will remember today. We're basically going to be observing the Passover today. Not the 14th day of the month Abib, but we're going to be observing the Passover per se, because we're going to be remembering that Christ, by way of the shedding of his blood and us being inside the house on the the doorpost, just like the ark was covered in pitch, just like Moses' basket was covered in pitch. That's what allowed them to be safe inside that boat covered in the pitch, inside that basket covered in the pitch, inside that house covered, the doorpost covered in the blood, inside the church covered in the blood. And when you see these themes, it answers the questions that we get so divided over about baptism and those things. The pictures just become so apparently clear. Then when you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and it says that the people were baptized unto Moses. So here they are surrounded by the water. They're going down in the midst of the Red Sea. They got water all around them, except, on dry ground on the bottom. But they're surrounded by the water. The cloud's above them. God in the cloud. And we know that cloud is basically what? Water. So he said that they were covered in the cloud, covered in the water, and they were baptized unto Moses. When were they saved? When were they saved? On this side of the Red Sea? Were they safe in the middle of the Red Sea? They weren't safe till they got on the other side of the water. They got to Moses. When you see that imagery, that it wasn't until Jesus came up out of the water that the Spirit of God descended like a dove and lighted upon him. And then the voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I will please. Hear ye him." That was when he fulfilled all righteousness. No, John, we have to do this. You have to baptize me, even though you don't feel worthy, because we must fulfill all righteousness. It didn't happen until he got to that other side. Just like Naaman, he wasn't clean until he finished washing, dipping that 7th time. Again, these things are repeated over and over and over. It makes it almost impossible to miss what God's put in there before. And it usually is always something extremely simple. And all these facts and all these details, and I don't want to say I've coined it, but this is how I've worded it through the years at times. The simple complexity of the Bible, or either the complex simplicity of the Bible, however you want to look at it. There's all these names and the begots and all this history and all these laws and all these commandments and these stories. But really, when you look at it, it's very simple. God has a very simple plan to save all of us. He wants all of us to come to Him. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's nothing that we go through that we don't all go through to some extent. We all have triumphs. We all suffer losses. We all, have life. We all suffer death. We have good days. We have bad days. Mistakes, good things. And we know that's common to man. And so God's trying to reach out to all of us, and He's got a simple plan that all of us can follow anywhere, anytime. Oh, do I understand what I'm reading? I'm not really. What's this guy talking about? Oh, I see you got your scroll open. Oh, what do you? That looks like Isaiah. That must be Isaiah or Jeremiah. Oh, Isaiah? Oh, the lamb going to the slaughter? Oh. Let me show you. Let me show you what he's talking about. And he started right there and preached unto him Jesus. So simple that going down the road, oh, here's some water. What's keeping me from doing what you told me about? You preached unto me Jesus, and obviously he had told him something about baptism. We know that from Acts 8, that when Philip went to Samaria, that they taught him the things concerning Christ. They taught them the things concerning the kingdom. That terminology is used interchangeably. We know that they were baptized. In that same context of them being taught. Then the apostles went to them and laid hands on them. Then they received the Holy Ghost. You see these things happen in order, and they happen in such a simple way that anybody, anywhere, they can hear. All they have to do is believe, confess that belief, turn away from their sin, and the best way for them to make that confession is for them to say, yep, I believe that God sent His Son to die upon the cross, shedding His blood, being put in the grave, just like Jonah for 3 days, to rise on the third day to give me hope over the grave. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to remember His death and His sacrifice because I'm fixing to do the same thing. So I'm going to go into the grave. I'm going to kill myself or allow myself to be put to death so that I can rise and walk in newness of life. I can be crucified, nevertheless I live. Yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And so these simple things in the Scriptures reveal themselves. All of us can meet anywhere. What does it take for us to worship God? Some fruit of the vine and some unleavened bread and somebody else. Another person. Where two or more gathered in His name, there's He in the midst of them. It doesn't take, you don't have to have a building. You don't have to have a lot of fanfare. We sing. Don't have to have books. God made it so easy for us to be a part of His kingdom. And even the organization of the church and how we function, God reveals these things throughout His Word. And so Moses leads them out. God is delivering them from the Egyptians. And you never see Egypt as a world power really after that. They're still a nation, but nothing like before. And so they leave Egypt. They are all across the Red Sea. Moses, Miriam, they do their songs, and the women dance, and everybody's happy, and they begin to make their way into the wilderness, and they start complaining right away. They get hungry. They get tired of they're thirsty. So at Miriam, it's not Miriam, it's Moriah, the place of bitterness, where they threw in that tree, and the bitter waters were made sweet. The rock was struck the first time and water flowed forth from the rock. We know that rock is Christ, that living water, John chapter 4. Again, I'm trying to remind us of all these little stories, really, they have Christ in them. And so they're making their way to Sinai. Moses had been to Sinai before. What's the other name of Sinai? Mount Sinai is also called Mount Horeb. So that's the same place Moses was where he saw the burning bush. And same place Elijah's going to go to eventually as well. And so they get to the Mount Sinai. Moses goes up. He gets the law. We remember the people, they got nervous, thinking Moses had died up there. He'd been up there for 40 days, and nobody could go up on the mountain. Joshua was allowed to get a little close, but nobody else could get there, get up to the mountain, or they would die. And so Moses comes down, and they've made a calf, a golden calf. And so he gets mad, breaks the tablets, kills the priest that had done it. The people that were involved, 3,000 die. They had to drink, remember, grind up the gold and drink it. And Moses had to go back and get the law again. This is where you don't just have the 10 Commandments. This is where you get all the law. So we could kind of jump here from Exodus 20, and after 20, it begins to go into all the different dimensions of the ark and the different things, not the ark, the ark would be included, the different furniture, the different coverings in the tabernacle, all the different dimensions and how to make it. Also, who would serve, who would be allowed to be priest, who would serve as the Levitical people, the Levitical servants, or they had their different courses. Then you had the priests that were of the Levites. And so they had a very strict and clear form of theocracy. So God gave them a law of how to govern themselves and govern themselves as a people. And so here they are, God's getting ready to take them to the promised land, to fulfill these things to Abraham, and he's preparing them. And so he gives them all these laws. And if I wanted to learn about the priesthood and a lot of the laws, which would include sacrifices and things of that nature, where would I read? Okay, go to the book of Leviticus. Where do you get that word, Leviticus? Leviticus. What does it sound like at the first of it? Book Leviticus, the Levites. So these Levites, these descendants of Levi, you remember one of the second son, Reuben, Simeon, third son, Levi. And so Levi was one of the ones with his brother Simeon that went and killed all the men of Shechem. Remember who had defiled their sister Dinah, wanted to marry him. So they made a plot to get all the men to join them and get circumcised. And when they were all laid up sore, they went and just massacred them. Abraham said, "What are you doing? Trying to get us all killed?" And so Reuben didn't get that blessing because he had slept with one of his father's concubines. Simeon and Levi didn't get the birthright of the blessing because they had so much blood on their hands. It goes to Judah. He's going to be that lion whom the lion lamb would come through. And so, but the Levites, they're going to be a special group of people, a special tribe that's going to be treated differently. They're not going to be in the army. They're going to be of service. They're not going to own land. They're going to have cities that are going to be dispersed on the east and the west side of Jordan, and they're going to be responsible for holding the law. They're going to kind of end up being kind of scribes, and we're going to see that part of their job, and you'll see early on, but then again, like in the times of Josiah, when there was the renewing of the kingdom, that the Levites, one of their responsibilities was to go around to the different areas and to teach, to make sure that the local people had the law, that they knew what it was, and they were involved in that. And so you had to be a Levite in order to be a priest. And so of the Levitical people, of the Levites, the tribe of Levi, who could be priests? Sons of Aaron, Moses' brother. And so this very distinct line is traced. And so you'll begin to see that some of the books, we said when we start getting to some of the later books of history, the Kings, and then Chronicles, and the prophets, you'll see that there's duplicate stories sometimes, or there's one book and it doesn't cover these things, but this book does. And what you have is you end up having double stories. Sometimes you'll have stories from the royal side, so like the kings and the things that were happening in the government with the people. But then you'll have a collection of writings about the priest and the spiritual things. And part of that was to keep the lineage, the verification of who could be a priest. And we're going to see that that's going to come into effect, and it's going to become a challenge when they come back from captivity. When they return from captivity, there's going to be some confusion about who is supposed to be serving. Are they qualified? Can they do that? And so they had to do a little background study. And so thankfully those scribes had kept good records, and they could go and prove it. And you remember that there was such a problem after Jeroboam had instituted, some false ways, and anybody could just buy the priesthood and become a priest. And so there was all kinds of dilutions and fallings away that had happened throughout time. And so to keep that order strict, they had to have tight records. So you'll see some of that happen in the books of history as we read a little further. So the book of Leviticus is going to cover especially the different sacrifices and the different observances. And if you look at most of the sacrifices that they were making, they were basically times of remembrance, times of observance so they could be thankful, times of fasting where they were to kind of cleanse and purge, even the Passover. For the week of Passover, getting ready for the 14th day of the month Abib, they were supposed to go through their cupboards and get rid of all the junk food, anything that had leaven. Basically, when they say when you go on a diet or you're getting ready to start a healthy thing, they say just go in and just don't say, well, I'll say that, Mom, I eat it. Well, no, if it's not good for your diet or whatever you're doing, just throw it away. And that's what they had to do, is they had to go in and get rid of everything, clean their whole house. They couldn't have anything in the cupboards. And they did a fast, so to speak. Not complete abstinence from food, but they didn't eat certain things the week of Passover and other times of observation. Sometimes during Sabbaths, they would take a time away from eating so much, or they cut certain things out, like maybe not eat sweets or eat meat for a while. It would be for certain purposes. We know that's going to become a theme with Christ. From the very beginning of his teachings, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. But he also told them that the kingdom of heaven was like leaven. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. So we are to be like leaven in the kingdom, so that it fills all of us and that it grows and multiplies. But we need to be aware of influence too. So all these little ideas that are planted in these laws will have a picture later on. So don't get lost in all the begats and all the different commands, because this is a social, economic, health system. It showed them how to be clean, how to get rid of them, how to have infection control, how to keep germs down in their house and how to handle different molds and different sicknesses, and whether they were infectious or not, and when they could be contagious, and when they were clean, and when they should make sure they were thankful, and when they should look to make sure that they realized that there was only one way to get an atonement, and that was through shedding of blood. And really, even then, they had to put that sin on the scapegoat and send it out into the woods to Azrael, and showing us that those sacrifices they were making, they weren't getting rid of their sin. I was just showing them that one would come that would get rid of that sin. And so there was a lot of different reasons that they had these different laws, like the Nazirite vow. So a person, it was their choice of vow, whatever it was. Maybe they were going to, who knows, abstain from sexual relations, or maybe like Paul made a vow that he was going to go to Jerusalem for the feast, shaved his head. They had these things that they could do to say, hey, I'm going to make this commitment. I'm going to do it in the temple. I'm going to show that I'm going to keep this commitment, and then when I'm done, I'll go make my sacrifice again to show I'm done. I'll shave my head again, and during that time, though, I won't touch anything unclean. I won't get drunk. I won't even touch grapes, and I'll be pure, and I won't shave my head until I'm done, unless I don't keep my word, unless I break my vow. And even if their family died, their parents died, they couldn't even go to the funeral, or they'd become unclean. And so there were different ways that they could be accountable, and that they could deepen their relationship with God. And so, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it would do us all good to contemplate. And I won't say participated, when I was in Virginia. My roommate and one of my best friends, he was already involved in some studies with some, they called themselves Messianic Jews. And so they were Christians, and so they believed in the New Testament scriptures and believed in Christ, and but they also followed some kind of old traditional ways. And they did have a observance of a Sabbath, so that they would just be quiet. And at the end of Friday, they would just kind of turn their phones off and stay at home and not turn on the TV, and they just kind of kept it quiet and relaxed. And hey, I even did that a weekend or two then. And then when I was in Alabama, I had another friend, and he just observed the Sabbath in the sense that he took that time to remove himself from the world, to get quiet, to have a time of rest so that he could be with his Father. And the whole purpose of some of those institutions under the law of Moses was to remind them of what he did at the very beginning. Just like Dad taught Sunday or the Sunday before, why did Moses then write us a decree of divorce? What did Jesus say? From the beginning, it was not so. What did he say at the Sermon on the Mount? You've been taught this. This is what you read under the law of Moses, but let me tell you what I'm really trying to do with you. He was trying to take them farther spiritually, and he took them back to the beginning to say, hey, when I instituted it, this is what I did. I created the world and the heavens in 6 days. I rested on the seventh. Because of this, a man shall work for 6 days, and then he'll rest on the seventh. His men servants, his maid servants, his ox, even the animals get a break. And so we don't do that enough. We really don't rest enough, in the sense that, typically from what I notice about most people in the Western world, America, when they do rest, it's kind of like, they finally, okay, well, I guess either I just have to, I'm crashed, it catches up with you, or you just you're worn out and you finally, I earned it, I got to rest. But God made it so that every week, every month, every quarter, biannually and annually, and then multi-year, like every 7th year or the year of Jubilee, he had these times where they would have a rest. And so that's why, again, not trying to stir up controversy, but y'all know me, that's one of the reasons I hold that Christ was crucified on Thursday, not Friday. Because John's account says that it was on a high day. It was a special Sabbath. Usually when we think of Sabbath, we just think of Saturday. A Sabbath was a day of rest. Just like Christmas, Halloween always falls on the 31st. Thanksgiving always falls on Thursday, right? Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, always happens on a Saturday. Pentecost or different feasts, they might fall on a certain day of the week because of how the numbering went. And so they could have a Sabbath during the week. So I think when they were asking for the body of Christ, they weren't saying, okay, well, tomorrow's Saturday, we got to hurry up and get him in the ground. That doesn't give 3 days and 3 nights. And John says it was a high day. It was a Sabbath day. You could have a Sabbath day. Passover would have been a day of rest, observation. And so God's setting up these things, some of them that go all the way back to the very beginning of time. And so keep in mind, there's a lot of those laws under the law of Moses that are eternal. That was a heavenly plans. That's why when you get to the book of Hebrews, you can see and have revealed to you a lot of those pictures. You really won't be able to get a real good grasp of the New Testament and see so many of its beauties if you don't have a good grasp on the Old Testament. And so, so we will pick up with the wandering, I guess Wednesday night. I wanted to get a little bit farther, but we'll pick up there and make a pretty good bit of speed through these next couple sections so we can get to the prophets. I really want to get into the prophets. Questions or comments before we close? All right, I love studying God's Word with you.